is the Montana Outdoor Podcast, brought to you in part by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. And by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. Now, get ready for more fascinating topics and the most interesting people you will ever find in Montana's great outdoors. We offer new podcasts most every Saturday. You can get a link to these podcasts by going to our website, montanooutdoor.com, or by going to our Facebook page, or just send an email to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com and say send a link to my email. It's that simple. Now let's head out with your host, Downrigger Dale, and see what's going on in Montana's great outdoors.
Thank you very much, Manny. And as Manny just said, I am Downrigger Dale with the Montana Outdoor Podcast. Boy, this has been a fun series. If you guys have been following along, what we decided to do this year, and a lot of this was prompted by your emails, which, by the way, thank you so much, all of you that email us and let us know, hey, I'd like to hear this or that. But a lot of people are saying, you know, I'd like to know more about what hunting is available in the different regions and why. And so you ask, you shall receive. This has been fun. I've been going around to each of the FWP regions around the state and just getting an outline of hunting opportunities in each region. It's been a lot of fun. We've been getting great information and great input from all of you, too. Thank you for that. Now, before we get started, I always like to welcome our active military that are listening all around the world. We are so honored that when you guys get a little time off, you like to listen to what we're doing here back stateside. I hope we bring a little bit of home back to you, and thank you so much for your service. All of us here really hope you get home soon. Be careful out there. Now, next on our stop, we're going to go all the way up into the northwest area of Montana. This is Region 1. Way up in the northwest corner, you're going to see things like Kalispell and Whitefish and Libby and all these great areas up in Region 1. We're going to be talking to Neil Anderson, and he's going to tell us all about what's going on there in Region 1. So, Neil, thanks so much for joining us here. I imagine you're getting pretty busy up there, huh?
Yeah, thanks, Dale, and thanks for having us on. Yeah, it's starting to pick up. The archery season is in full swing. Upland Game Bird is in full swing. Pheasant's about to start. So yeah, it's a busy time of the year for sure.
Yeah. Now, before we get underway with finding out what all the hunting opportunities are across Region 1, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from originally, and how you got into this outdoor business?
Sure. Yep. I actually grew up in the Black Hills of South Dakota, a little town called Custer, about 2,500 people. And, grew up outside of town and going out in the woods and hunting, fishing. Just being out there in the woods is always a big part of my life. I always kind of like to think of myself as I always wanted to know what was over that next hill. When I was out there just trying to investigate things, that curiosity. And I think that curiosity about wildlife and the habitat kind of carried over into my career. And so I went to school, got my undergraduate at South Dakota State, the Go Jackrabbits. Smell the grizzly winds. And then I came into Montana and went to school at Montana State University, where I got my master's degree. And while I was there, I started working at our wildlife health lab for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks as both a work study student and a technician. Where it just happened there as I was getting down with the master's, the biologist position opened up. But I took that position, was lucky enough to get her, and then eventually moved into the supervisor position. So I was either the biologist or the supervisor in the lab for 20 years. And it was a great opportunity, working on a lot of wildlife health issues, everything from chronic waste and disease up to their initial CWD monitoring efforts, big horn sheep pneumonia, brucellosis, a few other diseases. But I also get to work all over the state, so it allowed me a lot of opportunities to see the state. And then I moved up here to Kalispell with the wildlife manager position about 9.5 years ago, and been here ever since.
Well, it's a very beautiful area. I lived up in that area for a while back in my earlier days, and pretty stunning, and a lot of great hunting opportunities. Let's talk a bit about the Region One itself, as far as where it's located and its size and all that.
Sure. Yeah. As you mentioned, we're in that far northwest corner. So, just below Canada, and I know those serve as our boundaries to the north and to the west. And then we run clear over toward at the edge of Glacier National Park. We have pretty much all of the Flathead Forest in the Bob Marshall Wilderness Complex, as well as in Region 1. And then it goes down to the Flathead Reservation and then over to the Clark Fork Divide. So it's a pretty big chunk of the state, the northwest part of the state, but it's quite a bit different than a lot of areas in Montana, in that it's pretty heavily forested. So it's mountainous, rugged country, primarily montane forests. And so that's different than what you'll see, eastern Montana, even southwestern Montana, where you have a pretty dense tree cover. There's a lot of brush in this country. And so for those folks who aren't used to hunting in that type of environment, it can offer some pretty significant challenges.
Yeah. Yeah. That can be some rugged stuff up in there. As far as hunting goes, maybe you can give us an idea of how much of the region consists of public lands and how much are in the areas of private land. Now, Region 1 is kind of interesting and different in that there are national parks and all that in the area. So a little different for those of you listening that may have heard, like, for example, up in Region 6, we did a while back, and Region 3 and that. So tell us a bit about what that looks like as far as public and private hunting opportunities.
Yeah, one of the things we are blessed with is a lot of public land up here. The region itself is about 11,000 square miles. So it's pretty big. It increased to about 7 million acres, and 76% of it is public. So a large percentage of that is public land accessible to hunters. Then you add in things like block management and our conservation easements. The block managements are those kind of yearly agreement with landowners to allow hunting opportunity. And we have a lot of conservation easement work that we're working on. And that's more of an agreement with the landowner to offer public hunting as well as wildlife habitat in perpetuity. But between the block management and conservation easement, we have about another 600,000 acres. So if you combine those two, about 84% of the region is open to public hunting.
Wow, and that is like almost flipped opposite of a lot of the regions we've talked about so far. So if you want public hunting, Region 1 may be the spot to go to. That's a lot of land.
Yeah, definitely a lot of land, a lot of opportunity. One of the things that differs, I spent a lot of time in some of the other parts of the state, and there are a lot of places where, some of the Forest Service and public land might be landlocked, and you have to go to a very specific entry point, like a trailhead or something, and everybody kind of starts there. Up here, we have a pretty good road networks through most of that property, and so people can really spread out up here, and there's really not a whole lot of landlocked public ground that you just can't get to. So that 84%, the majority of it, if you're willing to work out a little bit, you can get to it.
Now, let's get into hunting opportunities for Region 1. What do you suppose Region 1 is most noted for? In other words, do you feel that region tends to be more big game hunters, or is it more bird, or is it fairly balanced?
I think we're most known for big game, in particular white-tailed deer and actually black bears. I mean, this forest habitat is pretty good habitat for both those species. And so we get a lot of folks come up here for not only for whitetails, but I get a lot of calls from all across the country, really, for folks interested coming out here to hunt black bears. And, this habitat is really conducive for those two species. But, that said, we also have a lot of upland game hunters. We have, we'll probably talk about that a little bit later, but we do have a fair number of folks who come up here to hunt upland game, primarily mountain grouse.
Yeah, yeah, well, like a lot of Montana, it's very diverse. Let's get started on some of those hunting opportunities. The FWP put out a great report, and I've talked about this in the other podcast before. Especially for big game, they put out the big game hunting forecasts, and when you look at the podcast description, whether you found this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or, any of them, YouTube, and that you'll see that podcast description talks a bit about what we are talking about now. But then as you read down, you're going to see in bold print, it says links. And below that, you're going to see all the different links. Now, one of the links I'm going to put in there is the link to the big game hunting forecast for Region 1. So if you want to pull that up now, you can and follow along. Don't have to. You can read it later. Remember, this podcast is up there forever, so you can always go back to it and look at it. So let's start with elk. What is the elk hunting looking like for Region 1 up there?
By and large, we're still in a situation where we're trying to grow our elk herds. We've seen a lot of changes in habitat over time for, maybe not as much logging activity in open country. And I think that combined with a healthy predator population, our elk populations have dipped a bit. And so we're actively trying to grow those. So you'll see that we're pretty restrictive on the antlerless harvest up here. And weather dry has a big impact on what happens with our recruitment. And so I think in that forecast, you'll notice that we talked about a pretty good year up here in terms of recruitment for elk, which is true. We're in Thompson Falls area, which is one of the places where we can actually fly and get good spring counts. We saw some of the highest recruitment we've seen in decades. So that's good news. And, I think with terms of elk in the region, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. We have some areas where our brow tine bull harvest is starting to approach a little bit closer to that long-term average, and in some places where it's still lagging behind a bit. I think one of the places that we really are concerned about is the Bob Marshall Wilderness area. We saw an increase in recruitment there, but it was still a level probably not indicative of an increase in population. And so that population has been depressed for quite some time. And so, it's down quite a bit. And so it's a population we're worried about, but, some of the other areas in the state, we're seeing, elk numbers even stabilize and maybe even come up a little bit, which is good news.
So what would you say as far as the hunting districts go for Region 1? What are the main districts that hunters will find best opportunities, in your opinion, as far as Region 1 for elk? In any hunting districts in particular that you think would be good ones to key on if folks that are listening here want to target elk specifically?
Yeah, I think, the kind of the center of our region, so is where we see a lot of our best elk habitat as well as our better herd numbers. So hunting district 103 is pretty well known. It's got the Lost Trail Wildlife Refuge, and it's kind of a neat place where you've got this spruce prairie kind of surrounded by forest. And so we have a pretty good elk herd there, the Thompson River, and then down into that Thompson Falls area. Hunting District 121 is the area that we probably have the most elk in. But, what goes along with that too is that, all the local folks know that as well. And so you'll probably have a little bit more competition in some of those areas. But we do have elk pretty much scattered across the region up here. They're probably in smaller pockets than you would find in some of the other parts of the state. But I usually tell people that, if you want to come up to this region, there's a couple of things you need to really look for, and that's try to find some places that have openings for good forage, some timber, which is not hard to find up here for cover, and then try to get somewhere at least a mile or more away from an open road. A lot of the research we've done shows that, a lot of those elk will just kind of avoid those areas where there's open roads. And so if you find those kind of habitats, you have a pretty good chance of finding elk in there.
Yeah. As I always say, the elk aren't stupid. They know,
No,
wait a minute, that's a road. That's where these guys hunt. So I'm going to stay away from that. So good point there. Another thing that I want you to talk about that is a bit unique to Region 1, and that is the terrain there can be, and you touched on it a little bit, but I'd like you to maybe touch on that a little bit more about it, because especially for those of you that say, yeah, I think I want to try getting after some elk up in Region 1, a beautiful country and that. But there's some pretty major challenges there that I guess folks really kind of need to know their limits as far as, one, how much terrain can you really handle realistically? And then two, if you're going to bring an elk down, can you get it back out of there?
Yeah, I think those are real considerations to think about if you're coming up to this part of the state to hunt. It varies from the Cabinet Wilderness area, which is really rugged, and the Bob Marshall as well, where you really have to be in shape or have stock to get in there and be very, very effective, especially if you get an animal down to get it out. I think the big thing that differs up here is it can be really hard to do kind of spot and stalk hunting. There are a few folks who do that and do it real well, and you have to find a vantage point where you can see out there a bit. But a lot of this is really tough. So what I've noticed too is, when you find those pockets of elk, you have to be pretty careful not to bump them out of there, because once you bump them out of there, they just kind of disappear. And good luck finding them again in this literally forest of trees. So yeah, I think being in good shape is definitely part of it. Getting to know the area a little bit before you head in there, so you know what you're getting into, and also having a good plan on how you're going to get an animal out. A lot of times you don't have stock, it's going to come out on your back. And one thing I noticed that's different from like other parts of the state is that you can get up on some of those ridges in a lot of part of the state and walk those side hills and do that pretty effectively. Up here, you get to these gullies and stuff with the brush, and it's a really tough thing to do. And so you spend a lot of time kind of walking through really thick forest and brush, and it gets to be pretty taxing at times. But yeah, I think, doing your homework, scouting out, finding your area, finding those areas that are likely to hold elk. But the other part of that is if you do that and you're willing to get away from the road, you can actually get in places where you may not see anybody else.
Yeah. You've got, you've got some areas there that you will have all to yourself. Some of it for good reason.
Right.
So just be honest with yourself. Is this an area that you can handle? And FWP's got some great maps, and of course there are other maps you can subscribe to, and that which many of you hunters have. But those are going to show you elevations and terrain, and just again, be respectful of that and be honest about that, because that you can get into some issues there. One issue that I know has been pretty prevalent, and we hear about be bear aware so often, but in this case, Region 1, that's another thing, is that is without a doubt grizzly bear country. Can you talk a bit about what some of those challenges are? Because that's where we have been seeing around the state some of these encounters that can end up not so good.
Yeah, and definitely we have, some of the higher grizzly bear densities in the state, especially in the, around the Glacier National Park area, or we call the Northern Continental Divide, but that stretches all the way down into the Swan and in the Whitefish Range over by Eureka. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of grizzly bears out there. In the middle of the state, you could still run into grizzly. The densities aren't as high, and then you get in the Cabinet Yaks where there's about 70-ish grizzly bears in that ecoregion, or ecosystem. So there are definitely bears. We tell everybody that all of Northwest Montana up here is grizzly bear country. You could run into one pretty much anywhere. And come prepared. We always tell people to carry bear spray. There's also food ordinance, restrictions in terms of how you handle your food if you're going to be camping out here. And so it's a good idea to know what you need to do to take care of yourself and take care of your camp, so you don't have a run-in with bear. Not just grizzly bears, but also, like I said, you have a lot of black bears too. So.
Yeah, and because that is good bear country, as you mentioned earlier, there you could get into some great black bear hunting, and we'll touch on that here in a bit. But just really, go through some of that, especially if you have not hunted in grizzly country. FWP has some great advice for you on their website. I think there's a lot of that around on the internet, but I think FWP has done a great job in really going through and telling you how to prepare to hunt in grizzly country. If you're prepared and you really know about that, you should be fine. But just follow those and really respect that, because it is a real issue, and so be careful. We're going to take a quick break here, Neil, and when we come back, I'd like to get into mule deer. That's something that's been kind of an interesting deal. Mule deer's had some challenges all across the state of Montana, so I'd like to see what your thoughts are as far as mule deer hunting in Region 1 and what kind of challenges you guys have dealt with as a wildlife manager for mule deer. So we'll do that right after this. My friends at Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer are proud authorized dealers of some of the most highly revered brands in the world, like CM truck beds, Diamond C trailers, and of course, Boss snowplows. Now, I know some of you may not want to think about this right now, but sorry, we have to face the fact that before we know it, fall will be over and winter will be with us for a long time. Now, last winter, we got off a little easier than in the past years, but this year it will likely be much different. Now, why do I say that? A while back, I did a podcast with Matthew Rosencrans in the National Weather Service Climate Prediction Center. He said that his long-term prediction models show that Montana and other areas in the Northwest are in for more precipitation this winter. Could be lots more. Of course, that means snow, and that means driveways, parking lots, and roads will need to be plowed. And of course, that means you'll want a Boss snowplow to get the job done quickly and perfectly every time it snows. And that, my friends, can only mean one thing. You need to talk to Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer right now about a Boss snowplow for your truck, tractor, ATV, or UTV, or whatever you're going to put it on. You need to do this now before they run out of them. You'll be prepared for what is coming, because not only will you have the best snowplow in the world that is perfectly designed for what you want to put it on, but the folks at Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer will install it for you so it works the first time and every time. Now, this is the time, my friends, to be ready this winter with the best. A Boss snowplow from Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. Now, if you're in the area, you can just stop by at 5680 Expressway in Missoula, Montana, or you can just go see them at rmtte.com. rmtte.com. Take a look at all the Boss snowplows they have right now, as well as the other equipment like CM truck beds and Diamond C trailers that will also make your life so much easier this winter. Yeah, there's no better place to get ready for winter than Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. Go see them now at rmtte.com. That's rmtte.com. And we are back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast. My guest is Neil Anderson. He is a wildlife program manager for Region 1. Now, that's up in northwest Montana. And we're talking about right now, we just finished up on elk, but now we want to get into mule deer. And, Neil, the different folks that I've been talking to in this series, some of them have had, some significant challenges in helping get mule deer back. Others, maybe not so much. What does Region 1 look like for hunting mule deer and especially for your mule deer populations in the area?
Yeah, I don't think we're any different than a lot of areas in the state where mule deer populations here have definitely been struggling. I mean, we're almost every district is quite a bit below our long-term average in terms of buck harvest. We have one district that seems kind of hang in there, but by and large, mule deer numbers are down below what they were historically. And so, yeah, it's been a real challenge. I think, in this country, we talked a little bit about habitat with elk, so some of those same things apply for mule deer. And then we've got whitetails that are also probably competing with mule deer. Then you add in a pretty healthy predator population, and all that equates to a mule deer population that seems to be a little bit more isolated. You find them in these isolated pockets, and you can find some good bucks, but it can be pretty challenging to hunt. Early on, a lot of those mule deer up in some more rugged country up here, maybe a little bit harder to get to, but they do sometimes come down during the winter to winter range, which makes some of those bigger bucks more vulnerable. But But definitely mule deer are one of those species that we're really trying to figure out how to increase numbers quite a bit.
Now, have you guys had to adjust regulations as far as on hunting muleys? What kind of regulation changes should we be aware of for Region 1?
You know, we only have a few regulation changes that folks need to be aware of, and that's happened in the last couple of years. But we've been at a no harvest for quite a few years now, so fairly restrictive on the antlerless harvest. And there's no antlerless opportunity in Region 1. And every once in a while, somebody makes a mistake and shoots a doe. But so I think hunters need to be aware of what you're shooting at and know that you can't harvest a doe or antlerless mule deer in the region. In terms of restrictions, we're primarily a 5-week season up here, so 5-week antlered buck season, with a couple of exceptions. In Region 101 or Hunting District 101, we went to a 3-week season followed by the remainder, which is a limited permit drawing only, and so a little bit more restrictive there. And the reason for that is to try to protect some of those bigger bucks that maybe come down to winter range a little bit later, half part of the season, become more vulnerable. We also have a small unit, a portion of Hunting District 103. We call it the North Fisher. It's basically Wolf Creek, between Wolf Creek and the Kukanus Reservoir. That's a limited permit drawing for the entire season, and folks need to be aware of that. We need to know where you're at on the map. We do actually have an early season mule deer hunt in the Swan, which allows folks to get into some real backcountry. It's in the Mission Wilderness, really rugged hunt. We do offer a few permits so folks can go in there early with the rifle and see if they can't find one of those big old mountain bucks. But other than that, for the most part, we're pretty restrictive in terms of season, and it's just a 5-week season for antlered bucks only.
Well, and speaking of regs, and I apologize, I forgot to ask you about for elk. So I guess while we're on that topic, any major changes with elk regulations for our elk hunters that they need to look for?
No major changes. Like I said, we're pretty restrictive on antlerless harvest. I mean, either brown-tailed bull or antlerless elk during archery in most of our areas. And then when hunting, the general season comes up, it's primarily brown-tailed bull with limited elk D licenses. And so that's pretty much the same across the region, with the exception of like 170, which is it's one of our urban areas, and that's either sex elk. But everywhere else, it's pretty limited. And you're primarily looking for a brown-tailed bull if you don't happen to have one of those B licenses in your pocket.
Okay. Now back to the muleys. What would you say would be for those hunters that say, I really would love to try to find some great mule deer up in Region 1. What hunting districts do you think would be the main ones to key on for muleys?
We have a couple of districts that are probably the better districts for mule deer. 103 is a pretty good one. We've got a major winter range over in the Fisher area, but you have to watch out for that permit area. Hunting District 122, which is our Thompson River, has probably been the most consistent in terms of harvest over time. And if you really want to go after a big muley and you're in shape and you want that wilderness type hunt, you can go into the Cabinet Mountains, which is primarily our Hunting Districts 104 and some of 120, 121. And it's a backcountry hunt. They're still pretty in low densities there, but you have a chance of finding a really big mountain buck in those areas.
Yeah, that, like you say, it's a bit challenging, but boy, what a stunning area too. That whole Cabinet area. Goodness gracious, that is
the area. It's definitely not for everybody though. It's a brutal art.
Yeah. Be prepared there, folks, and really know what you're doing. But that could be, like you say, a pretty major good part of it. So. Anyway, so there's what you're looking at for muleys, gang. And again, anytime during this podcast that you think, I'd like a little more information, just, jot down your question so you don't forget it and keep listening, or you can pause it. But when you go to those links areas, we'll have a link to Neil's email, and you're more than welcome to shoot him an email and ask him any specific questions you have about that.
Yeah. So Bill, one thing that on mule deer, to kind of keep it in perspective for folks is we have about 3% of the mule deer population in the state, and we harvest about 3% of the mule deer bucks. So if you're looking at mule deer, it's definitely not the area with the most mule deer. So it's about a 3% of the harvest comes from Region 1. So
Yeah, I would say it's definitely not a destination thing, but if it's one where you've happened to have it, more of an opportunity type hunt, you see one and you happen to have the right license and everything for it, then that could be. You mentioned earlier about whitetail, and whitetail hunting in Region 1 can be pretty incredible. Talk a bit about what your whitetail herds are looking like and how whitetail are faring, say, compared to past years.
yeah, we consider whitetail our kind of one of our bread and butter species. They're pretty much everywhere in the region. I mean, we see whitetail deer from the valley bottoms, even up to 7,000-foot elevation. You saw a whitetail buck in places where you think this is only mule deer and bighorn sheep, and there's a whitetail buck up there. So yeah, they're pretty much everywhere. Definitely some areas have more than others, but pretty ubiquitous across the region. In terms of population, in the winters of 16 and 17, we had some pretty tough winters, and we saw our populations dip down a bit. And we slowly been starting to climb out of that. This year we had really good recruitment, one of the highest recruitments we've seen in whitetail deer. So we'll probably be seeing, hopefully, some increases in deer populations because of that. It might take a couple of years of real good recruitment to kind of get us back up to average. But there's still a lot of deer on the ground, whitetail deer. And, in a couple of years, as that age class kind of moves up, hopefully it'll equate to some of the larger, more mature deer as well.
Yeah, that's what always amazed me about that region for whitetail is, we I guess as whitetail hunters go, we tend to focus on a lot of those riparian areas and that. But like you said, it is not unusual to find a whitetail in elk country if you think about it. So, do some looking and thinking on that. For the whitetail, any regulation changes or things that we better watch out for there?
There's a couple things, and I forgot to mention something about mule deer, and I'll maybe touching that as well. So, the big thing with whitetails is going to be in our CWD management zone. And so we have a either sex B license that you can apply for. And if you get it, it's this year's new, it's going to be mandatory testing. So you're required to get it tested for CWD, or chronic wasting disease. And that's within 10 days of harvest. And so we have a CWD sampling station that's set up in Libby. It's be running Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then Tuesday afternoons. But you could also come to some of our check stations at the office here or send it in yourself. But it's mandatory testing, and that's trying to bolster our sample sizes so we have a better idea of what's going on with CWD there. And then, that we talked about that limited permit for mule deer, and that's right next to where we have CWD. So we're really concerned about CWD getting into that population. And so if you possess one of those limited permits for mule deer in that, the 103-50K, that North Fisher portion, that's also mandatory testing for chronic wasting disease.
Okay. So be sure and check that out. Now, I'll put a link for those of you that would like to get your own sample and send it in. I will put a link. There's a pretty good video out that'll show you how to collect your own sample. Certainly, you do not have to do that. Like you say, you could take it into the check station there in Libby, and they can take care of it for you. If you've not done that, you don't want to spend the time learning, that would probably be your better bet. But certainly you can do it yourself.
Sure. Then there's the other one I was going to maybe mention is the swan. I mentioned back in the winters like 16, 17, we saw a little bit of a dip in populations, and whatever reason, the swan just hasn't quite responded as well as some of the other districts. So we've backed off of the early season portion of our general license where you could shoot either sex whitetail. So in most of the region, the first week it's either sex whitetail. So basically any whitetail deer is available for harvest. In the swan, we eliminated that. So it's it's a antlered buck only for the general season. for the most part. There's some youth opportunity as well there, but on the general license, it's one of the few places right now it's just antler buck only.
Oh, good point. So folks that maybe are used to hunting that need to make sure you check that out. And of course, in the links area, I always put a link to all the regulations in Montana. So, and I won't harp on you guys too much about it, but just get yourself familiar, of course, like you should do for anything, and make sure. Now, one last thing on the whitetail, like say for an old duffer like me that wants maybe a little easier hunt and really loves to eat whitetail, which I do, what would you recommend is a good spot that maybe wouldn't be quite as challenging, but your odds of harvesting a nice whitetail would be good? Where would you recommend for that?
I think a lot of that timber company land that I talked about kind of in the middle of the region is a good place to go. And there's a lot of logging roads in there, and a fair number of them are actually closed off, but it makes for fairly easy walking to get into some of these areas. So with whitetails, you don't always have to get as far away from the road. I mean, they have their own ranges and they seem to just move a little bit, shift a little bit away from some of those roads at times. But, there's plenty of opportunity there. And one of the things I really like to do, and I think more people are trying it, is as rut's about to start or during rut, is to try to rattle. And,
okay.
Yeah. And it's a fun way to hunt. It's you don't have to kill yourself to try to hike miles and miles and miles. You can go to a certain area where there's maybe a fair number of tracks and find a good vantage point and try rattling. And, it can be pretty successful. It's a lot of fun to see those deer start coming in, and you have both bucks and does coming in at times. It's not a 100% guarantee, but, it's been pretty successful. I've had pretty good luck doing it.
Yeah, it does work. There's no doubt about it. Now, you be prepared sometimes for a bit of a surprise because they will come in sometimes ready for a fight. I had a good buddy of mine that was doing the rattling, and he ended up getting run right over by a whitetail. So, be prepared for that.
Yeah, it seems, I don't know how they know, but they almost always come in behind it. So whatever direction you're facing, just assume they're going to come in from behind you.
Yeah. But good point. That definitely can be a big surprise for you. Now, one thing I don't get to talk very much about in these regional podcasts is moose, and of course that is a permitted animal. That is not an easy permit to get. But for those of you that may have secured a moose permit, talk a bit about moose hunting in Region 1 and what that's like, because that is some pretty good moose country, isn't it?
Yeah, it is pretty good. I mean, I think our populations are down historically from what they have been. And, we had just finished up a 10-year statewide project, and we had one of the study areas up here. And, I think it's down from what it was historically, but it appears that our moose are kind of stabilizing and maybe even a slight increase. So, yeah, it's been a little bit more restricted. We don't allow any antlerless harvest of moose, so it's bulls only. And like a lot of the things, moose are in low densities all across the state, and Region 1's no exception. So moose hunting can be pretty challenging. Plus, you've got all the timber and the brush and that kind of stuff to contend with here. But I think, when you draw a license, you have pretty decent odds of getting a bull. You have to probably work for a little bit, although we do have some guys who get them right off the road. I've never been that lucky, but
that's what we all wish for. But it could be tough. But kind of an exciting hunt if you're lucky enough to get the draw. Yeah.
Yeah, we tell people, the best time to hunt up here is during that rut. So it's kind of going on right now. It's pretty close to elk rut, maybe a little bit later. Because then those bulls are down there with the cows, and they're a little bit easier to find. They might respond to a call. And then as those rut ends, those bulls have a tendency to pull off, and then they get a little bit harder to find. Something, if we get good snow and you can find tracks, that's another good way. But we really encourage folks to kind of go out early, make sure you try to catch that rut. And then look for places where you've got openings that have come back into pretty good brush in connection with some, more timbered areas so there's good security. And those are the best places to try to look for a moose.
Yeah. So if you did happen to get that permit, let us know if you get one, because we always like to post it on our website, montanooutdoor.com, and that, because they are some pretty fascinating animals. So speaking of some of these other special permits, what about bighorn sheep? Is that a kind of a go-to area at all, Region 1, for those?
Yeah, we've got some pretty good units up here. There's a few of them that are doing better than others. Some of the areas where we've seen some pretty good increases in our population that, it dipped down a bit, but like the Permit Paradise area. So it's a shared herd with the Flathead Reservation. It's the stuff east of Thompson Falls. And our biologist counted 350 bighorn sheep this last spring of good recruitment. Yeah. And so we're back up into numbers that, we were historically, I think, in that area. So that unit's doing pretty well. We've had some recent fires in there as well, and still kind of evaluating what that mean for the bighorn habitat. We're thinking that hopefully it'll be a plus where you get a lot more forage production. Then as you can move more toward the Thompson Falls area, there's a couple of herds that have been, down a bit from what they were historically. There's still some opportunity, right north of Thompson Falls, and then what we call the Bray Mountain herd or the Cabinet Mountain herd. Those are down from where they've been historically. And again, there's been a lot of fires in there, so we're kind of watching to see what's going on there. But they've kind of stabilized at this lower level. One of the herds that is doing better than it has historically, at least the recent history, is our Clark Cutoff herd. We had a die-off in there around 2015, and our biologist only counted like 15 animals. We figure there's somewhere between 15 and 20 sheep on the ground, and that was down from almost 100. That happened within just a couple of years. So pretty sure it's probably a disease-related die-off. Then in 2018, we were seeing some lamb recruitments. We brought in some sheep actually from the breaks up in Region 6. We brought in 20 and seemed to help bolster that population. And now we're figuring we perhaps somewhere between 60 and 80. So
Wow.
So from like 2015 of probably less than 20 to around 80, 60 to 80 now. That herd is definitely headed in the right direction, and we saw pretty good recruitment in there again this year. So hopefully we'll get that back to where it was historically here in the near future.
Wow. So hats off to you guys and helping restore that area. We're going to take one more quick break here, Neil. And then when we come back, I want to talk more about black bear hunting. You had mentioned it before, and Region 1 can be a great spot for you black bear hunters. So we're going to touch on that a bit. And then we'll get into talking a bit about wolves and, well, all kinds of other things. So stick around. We'll be right back right after this. Hey, I want to tell you a bit about one of the great businesses that is responsible for making this podcast possible. I'm talking about my friends at Superior Hardwoods of Montana. They're a well-established Montana company with origins starting way back to 1977. They've been proudly serving the Missoula community and, well, far beyond that since then. Yeah, so no matter where you're listening, they can help you. Now, again, if you have been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that some of the things Superior Hardwoods is most known for are their extraordinary flooring lines. In fact, a majority of those are manufactured right there in their lumber yard in Missoula. And speaking of flooring, they just introduced the Timeless Pre-Finish series. Now, this is a series designed to simplify the overwhelming task of remodeling and replacing the old worn-out flooring in your home. This new series allows you to effortlessly transform any room pretty much instantly. This flooring is made in America and comes in pre-finished maple, hickory, white oak, red oak, ash, and reclaimed oak. It's just beautiful. It has a superior quality sealer and matte finish to it. Now, this totals 6 coats of durable protection on the floor. But along with all their different flooring lines and their acres of reclaimed beams and lumber, they also offer fantastic products to complete your remodel. Thousands of feet of alder molding and hundreds of square feet of stunning antique paneling. Just beautiful stuff. That's going to make your home feel special to you and your family and friends every time they come see you. It's kind of amazing when you think about it, but when you work with the folks at Superior Hardwoods of Montana, you'll be able to create a look for your home that says who you really are to all who stop by. I guess what I'm trying to say is it completes your remodel project to the point that your house just doesn't have a new look or updated look to it. No, it becomes much more than that. Not just a house you live in, but it is now uniquely your home. And it'll feel that way, not just because the project is completed. No, it will feel that way every time you and your family and friends walk through the door. That, my friends, is the difference that Superior Hardwoods of Montana makes. Stop by their showroom in Missoula, Montana today if you can, or give them a call at 406-251-2272, or just visit their website. It's a great way to get to know them at superior-hardwoods.com. That's superior-hardwoods.com, and let them guide you through the woods. We are back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast with Neil Anderson of Region 1. And Neil, thank you so much for spending so much time with us. But this is such a great area to hunt. And for those of you that have maybe never tried Region 1, you know, you may have your hunting plans all set for this year. Take a look at Region 1. You may have some fun and really see a whole different side of Montana that you may have never hunted in, and it's definitely worth considering it. Now, you had mentioned, Neil, about black bear and that the odds of finding a black bear pretty good in Region 1. Talk a bit about black bear hunting in Region 1, what your populations are like, and then maybe touch on where the best spots are to find those.
Sure. Like I said, black bears are pretty much everywhere in the region. We've got really good habitat for black bears. It's this forested country up here with a fair amount of berries really seems conducive to growing black bears. A couple of years ago, we had really good harvest of black bears. So we had 2 years in a row. I think it was 2021 where we harvested over 700 black bears in Region 1 alone each year. So pretty close to 1,500 black bears are harvested in those 2 years. Yeah,
that's a lot.
Yeah. We can, depending on the year, we harvest anywhere from 25 to almost 30% of the black bears in the state get harvested in Region 1. And so it's a pretty high harvest. We did see the population, at least harvest dip down quite a bit after that. But hopefully it'll start building back up again. There's still a fair number of bears out here. A lot of people come out here from other parts of the country to hunt. And I get a lot of calls from folks coming from everywhere. And this is true of other parts of Montana, but a lot of folks come out here because we have those different color phases of black bears. If you go to Pennsylvania and some places like that, they probably grow bigger bears, but you don't get the browns and blondes and cinnamons. And so there's a lot of opportunity up here to actually see some bears that they're black bears, but they look quite a bit different.
In name only.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and that brings up an important thing is then, especially if you're not a real experienced black bear hunter, you really need to know how to identify, because when you get up in Region 1, just like you said, the color doesn't mean anything. I mean, it could be all different colors of them. So you want to make dang sure you don't shoot a grizzly bear, because that is you are not going to like what happens there. So talk a bit about the identification process and the fact that you do have to take that little test.
Yeah. We need to go and take that test. It's online. There's a series of different pictures of bears, and, you have to try to identify them. And I think it really does help. And even if you just want to brush up, you have to take it in order to hunt bears. But even if you just kind of want to brush up on your ID, it's not a bad idea to go back and try to revisit that. With bears, the difference between grizzly bears and black bears, you got to look at the head. Grizzlies have more of a dish-shaped head. Yours might look a little bit smaller on their head than a black bear, where black bears might look a little bit tall, bigger. You're also looking for that hump, although depending on the situation, on how black bear's standing, you might look like it has a little hump as well. And then also the claws. So yeah, it can be a bit of a challenge. But a lot of people are really successful at it. We get very few miss IDs. But the big thing is if you're not sure, don't shoot. You don't want to be in a position where I thought it was a black bear, but I wasn't quite sure, and you shoot and you find out it's not. There are other opportunities out there. I just pass on the ones that you're not sure about, and when you're real comfortable, those are the ones you ought to be taking.
Yeah, and like you say, Region 1 is a great spot for it. So, it's okay to pass. You're going to find another one. Is there any area for, say, a new black bear hunter that comes to Region 1 that you can say, yep, your odds are super good in that area? I know you said that they're all over Region 1, but any one that might be a little more concentrated?
Yeah, typically when I talk to black bear hunters, I try to find out what kind of hunt they want and how willing they are to get back to the backcountry and those type of things. But, if you're looking for densities of bears, usually the swan, the yak, the whitefish range, some of those areas that are a little bit wetter have a tendency to have a little bit higher density. And then that center region center part of the region is a little bit drier, a little bit more open, and we still have black bears in there, but maybe the densities aren't quite as high. But if you're not one who wants to go into maybe the deep dark forest, that the central region part of the region is a good place to go. There's a little bit better access there, and if you like to do more spot and stalk, there's some more opportunities there because you can find a few more openings to actually look in. So yeah, if you're looking for densities of bears, kind of the Eureka area, whitefish range up there, the swan and the yak probably have some of the highest densities in the region.
All right, good information there. Now let's shift gears to wolves. Should be some decent opportunities, I would assume. What are your counts looking like for wolves in Region 1?
Yeah, Region 1, I mean, one thing we do have is a lot of the predator species, and wolves are no exception. Estimated somewhere, maybe just under 500 wolves in the region, which is more than anywhere else in the state. So
yeah.
So there's a fair number of wolves, and all day habitat is basically occupied. And so you can run into wolves, but when you say 500 wolves and you think we have almost 7 million acres of habitat, it's like there's a wolf behind every tree. But
right, yeah.
But there's a fair number of them out there. They're a very challenging animal to hunt. I'd say most hunters don't even see one when they come out here. And it takes some skill set to learn how to hunt them. I mean, obviously there's some opportunistic wolves that are harvested. Guys out there hunting deer or elk, they happen to see one. But yeah, it's the wolf population is doing just fine, and I think there's plenty of opportunity out here. And I would just encourage folks, if you really want to come out here and do that, to reach out to us, maybe even reach out to some of the locals who've done that before, and try to learn the techniques for hunting wolves, and it'll make you much more successful.
Yeah,
that applies for trapping as well. They're a pretty smart animal.
Yeah, and there was some confusion, and I got a couple emails on it, and I referred folks to the regs and that, but you might be able to clear it up as far as what the hunting season is for wolves and that, because I know there were changes, and then it got in the news about this or that. What is the wolf season for Region 1?
I think what folks need to do is stay tuned. I mean, the commission is going to be making a decision on that come this November. And then, there's been a court case and a lot of stuff that obviously it's still in the legal realm. So can't say a whole lot about that. But I think that the commission is going to come out with a season package, not just for Region 1, but for the entire state here. So right now it's a bit of an uncertainty what that's going to look like. But hopefully here come November, we'll have a decision on what it looks like, and we can get it out to folks. So on that, I'd just say, stay tuned.
Okay.
Yeah, the hunting season is still in place, though. That we're primarily talking about the trapping season. So right now, wolf season starts in September, early in September, and typically goes through March. That could change as well with the commission this coming.
Yeah. Don't take any current regulation for granted. Keep tabs on that. And for those of you that are, diehard wolf hunters, you probably already know to do that, but just be a little careful on that one. Now, speaking of predators, another predator that always just fascinates me. And full disclosure, sometimes scares me because they are such a different breed of cat, because that's what they are. Let's talk about mountain lion hunting. I had a interesting close call with a mountain lion when I was young. We had one on our ranch. I grew up on a cattle ranch west of Missoula, and we had a mountain lion that was just picking our calves off like nobody's business. And so I was going to be the hero of the ranch when I was a kid and go stop this mountain lion. And me and a buddy we heard him out there and decided we were going to go get him. And my buddy scared him. And then blinded him with a flashlight, two young kids doing something stupid. And so then he just took off in my direction. I could hear him coming, but I couldn't see him. And then every now and then I'd hit him with my flashlight and blind him some more. And the next thing I knew, he ran right over the top of me. Didn't attack me. He was just trying to get the hell out of there. But that was a scary situation. But lion hunting is something, I guess we should probably say you really need to know what you're doing and that. But it can be fascinating if you're ever interested in it. One thing that I would suggest is go out with a lion hunter and learn about it. Some of them don't even harvest the animal; they just like treeing them and moving on. But talk a bit about the lion hunting opportunities in Region 1.
Sure. Yeah, it takes a couple things to grow good lion populations. That's trees and deer, and we happen to have both of those, particularly white-tailed deer. So yeah, we probably have some of the highest lion densities in the state. Folks should know that a couple of years ago, the Fish and Wildlife Commission did make a decision to try to reduce lion densities by 30 to 40% in Northwest Montana and in some other parts of the state. So we've increased the number of licenses that are available out there, but we still have decent lion hunting. There's still a lot of lions on the ground. Like you said, it's not something that is an easy thing to do. You question a lot of the folks that have been out there hunting in lion country, how many lions have actually seen, over the years. I can only think of a few times where I've been out hunting and have actually seen a mountain lion.
Yeah.
But they're out there. And so, in some places, folks have been actually pretty good with predator calls and getting lions to come in. And so there's opportunity to hunt without hounds. And then we have our winter season, which you don't have to use hounds, but most people use hounds and like chasing tree lions and harvest them that way.
Yeah, that some of these hound hunters are fine, going out if you want to go out with them, and to me that's fascinating and something I don't know, just a side thought. If you want to have a very interesting hunt, go out with a
definitely
group of hounds.
Unique way of hunting that most people will never experience. So if you have an opportunity, like see a lot of locals are willing to take folks out. There's also outfitters out here that do the same. And so you might go book with one of them. And so, if they're probably the most successful at actually harvesting lions. The guy that's out there in the woods trying to call them in or even stalk them it's a challenge.
Yeah.
A few guys do it, but most of the lions are definitely harvested through use of hounds.
Yeah, like you say, you don't see them very often, but I guarantee you that they have seen you. They're just so good at being stealthy. They may have even followed you for a bit to see what you might drop. So, yeah, they're interesting animal. Now, let's shift gears big time here and get into bird hunting. Mm-hmm. For bird hunters, whether it be waterfowl or upland game bird, give us kind of an idea of what Region 1 is like there in Northwest Montana for hunting birds.
Sure. Maybe we'll start with upland game. And so we have all three species of mountain grouse up here. So rough grouse, spruce grouse, and dusky grouse, or formerly known as blue grouse. Rough grouse are the number one species that gets harvested up here. And it's not quite 2 to 1 to the other ones, but it's pretty close. But we do have blue grouse as well as spruce grouse. So if you're looking for some variety in mountain grouse, we've got it up here. Densities are pretty good. I haven't seen quite as many broods as I thought I might this year. I'm still seeing a few, so I think our grouse population is probably pretty close to average, what it has been over the years. But but it's a great opportunity, depending on whether you want to go up higher looking for those duskies, a little bigger bird, or some of the mid to lower elevations where you're looking for rough grouse or spruce grouse. There's plenty of opportunity out here, and we do harvest a fair number of grouse in the region. Pheasants are a little bit more of a novelty, if you want to think of it.
Yeah,
that
I was
way.
going
We
to
don't
say,
have
you
a
probably
ton
don't
of
run
pheasants.
across those much, huh?
Yeah, we do have some, night bite wildlife management area, which is actually within the Flathead Reservation, is actually part of Region 1. It's administered through Region 1. And that's probably our best pheasant hunting habitat. It's a prairie pothole region, combined with the wildlife management area, as well as tribal land that's open to hunting for folks who have the right license, as well as U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. There's about 11,000 acres of more or less connected habitat down there to hunt. So we have a few opportunities, mostly on private land, but in the Flathead Valley as well, where you can get into some pheasants. But it's a bit more restricted.
What about turkey? Do you have decent turkey hunting up there?
We do have decent turkey hunting, and our turkey populations are actually doing really well. I probably get more complaints about turkeys than anything else.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people realize, we harvested about 1,700 turkeys in the region last year.
1,700.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's quite a few, and turkeys have been doing real well. For the purist, I think some folks, we ended up with kind of a mixed bag of, kind of Easterns and Merriams up here, and probably some crossbreeding. So if you're a purist and you only want to go after that Merriams, the southwestern part of the state probably has genetically more Merriams, but the rest of it's kind of this a mixed bag between Easterns and Merriams. But if you're just looking for turkey and they all kind of behave the same and probably all taste the same. Just about everywhere in the region, you focus on those lower elevations for the most part. And you can run into turkeys over a lot of different country in this area. I was often surprised where I'm seeing turkeys.
Yeah, they are, in my opinion, one of the funner animals you can hunt. Different as far as their characteristics and what they do, but once you get it down, you can find turkeys pretty much anywhere. Is there any one particular area in Region 1 that may have a little more density of turkeys?
We have a lot of turkeys around Libby. Even the city is trying to figure out somehow some of those are urban turkeys. Are trying to figure out how to.
Really? The turkeys are getting into town, huh?
Oh, there's lots of turkeys in Libby. I drive down the streets to see them all over. But those also extend out into the forest around Libby. And so there's some public opportunity there. I have a fair number of turkeys up in the Eureka area, as well as even around Kalispell. So it's, like I say, I think anywhere, especially in the spring, maybe hunt some of those lower elevations. And as the snow level kind of goes up, see like some of the turkeys follow that. But those are the areas I usually recommend folks. You can go west of town here in Kalispell and you can get into turkeys there, but I also suggest trying to go up by, the Trigo Eureka area, as well as over by Libby, and should be able to get into some pretty good turkey hunting.
Wow. I had no idea that the turkeys were out shopping in Libby these days. So
Yeah.
those buggers, they can get into a lot of stuff. How about waterfowl? Of course, for Region 1, most of us always think of the Nine Pipes area that you mentioned as the big waterfowl area. So talk a bit about that and where else we might find waterfowl in Region 1.
Yeah, and obviously you mentioned Nine Pipe. That's definitely a good spot. But there's some folks that hunt around Flathead Lake. We have a North Shore Wildlife Management area just north of Flathead Lake, where there's some folks that come in off that and some of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service property and hunt in there. And there's also some sloughs off the Flathead River and some other smaller lakes in the valley and even in the mountains where some of the folks get into some pretty good duck hunting. We're probably not the destination area that some of the other parts of the state are, but there's some decent duck opportunity up here for those guys who really want to get after it. The Stillwater lakes, upper and lower Stillwater have some duck hunting opportunity. So yeah, it's you got to kind of look for them, but those valley bottoms are probably some of the better areas to go. Which, of course, a lot of that is also private, so you may have to ask. But and we do have some ducks that nest here. But a lot of the better duck hunting happens a little bit later as we get some of those northern ducks that are starting to migrate through. And so then the duck numbers start to increase. And so we're more of a stopover area for waterfowl.
Yeah. So check that out. And that might be something, if you want to combine a hunt and say, okay, I'd like to maybe try a little upland game bird or that, and then come down into the valleys a little bit for waterfowl. But pretty good, can be some decent stuff there. So yeah, might as well take a look at it. Now you mentioned that some of these areas that you would want to look for those could be on private ground. We touched on hunter access a bit early on in this podcast. And of course, Region 1 is probably the best region in the whole state as far as a lot of public ground. But how is that going as far as the private lands there? Are you getting good block management participation with landowners? Has that grown, stayed the same? What is that looking like?
Yeah. We're actually, it's grown a bit. Like I mentioned, we have about 600,000 acres in our block management program. So pretty
That's
good
impressive.
pretty good chunk of property. The majority of those, the corporate timber companies, as well as some of the larger landowners, are in block management. And so if you look at the region, you're kind of stuck between Kalispell, Libby, maybe a little over Chief Falls, kind of like I said, the middle of the region. That's where the majority of that land is at. And so a lot of that is completely open to hunting. It's you don't have to ask. It's go in. The one big thing that folks should know is the Flathead Ridge Ranch, which is a landowner that bought some property west of town here. That's about 100,000 acres. That's in block management there. They are requesting that folks fill out an entry card and put that on their windshield this year. So that's different for folks. That's not been in the case in the past where it was just go and you don't worry about it. They are trying to get a better number on how many folks are out there hunting on their property. And so we're requesting that everybody gets one of those. There's some kiosks out there where you can grab this permit slip, or you can come into the office here and get one as well. So folks should be aware of that. Then we'll start with the general season. And just be aware of it. And it should be pretty easy to find one of those permits. So, but once you have it, you just go.
Well, and as I've mentioned before on these podcasts, when we talk about getting access to private lands, just remember, folks, and I touch on this quite often, but I don't think I can touch on it enough. It really is up to us, and that if we are going to continue to get more landowners participating and keep the ones involved that are, you really got to think things through and be respectful and cherish that access and treat it as such. And that way we'll always have it. Right.
Yeah. And I think that's, one of the complaints we hear most from the landowners, even the timber companies is some of the disrespect. And I think it's probably the minority of people out there, between leaving garbage out there. Some people even go to the extremes of tearing out gates and those kind of things, which gets to be obviously very expensive for the landowner, but puts a bad light on all hunters out there. So, the hunters can help too and kind of police our own ranks. And, if you see guys out there, maybe not challenge them, but maybe, like you said, it's up to us. And if we want to keep being able to use this property, you need to be very respectful and remember that, even if it's timber company land or whatever, it's still private property. And
yeah,
and hunting is a privilege, not necessarily a right.
Well, and like you said, the vast majority of hunters are great, but it only takes a couple, and then, oof, that land gets shut down. So, yeah, just be cognizant of that and do your best. But all in all, Region 1 is a pretty fascinating and special place. But as far as challenges, what would you say is like your major challenge that Region 1 is facing, or maybe there's a couple of them that you want to talk about? What would that be, or is there any?
Yeah, there are definitely some challenges. With this, one of the first ones I'll talk about is, with this forested habitat, we don't have a whole lot of areas where we can do aerial surveys. And so if you're looking at elk and mule deer and those type of things that typically you look, a biologist will go out up in an airplane or a helicopter. and survey for, we're pretty limited on where we can do that. And so we get questioned a lot about, what population status is. And we don't have a real good way of estimating that other than maybe looking at harvest from the past years and see how that's changed. So we actually have a research project trying to evaluate whether we can use trail cameras to come up with population estimates.
Oh,
it's a 5-year project, and we're hoping we can make that work. And it'll be a little bit of a game changer for us in terms of monitoring populations, and as well as trying to evaluate, if we do make a change in the regulations, what kind of effect it has on the population. Where now it might take us a lot longer to try to figure that out, whether it had any effect at all. So we're really hopeful that will be a benefit to us. There's actually a little video on the webpage that you can find that talks a little bit about the project. And the other challenges that we're facing, we talked a little bit about, mule deer and elk to some extent, trying to grow those populations. And because we're not the land management agencies out there, Forest Service, state lands, as well as the timber companies are in charge of that. And it's trying to work with them to try to help improve habitat conditions for all those species that we think would benefit from that. And definitely, I think that's one of the big changes. You want to see how things have changed in the region. You can go on to some of those, Google Earth or some of these other places where you can see aerial photos of what it looked like back in the 70s and 80s and to now. And a lot of this habitat has really filled in and grown up really thick. So I think for forage opportunities, it's become a little bit more limited in some places.
Yeah. And like you say, one of the ways that us hunters can help with that is, getting that check station data and all that. How many check stations do you have in Region 1, and where are they at?
So we currently run 4 check stations in the region. So if you go out to Thompson Falls, has one just west of town. We have a check station out west of town here. It's by an old weight station. It's about 6 miles west of town on Highway 2. There's one at the kind of the north end of the Swan. Then we have one over at Aldi. And those are mandatory stop. All hunters must stop whether you have game or not.
Mm-hmm.
But we also offer CWD testing as long as we're not too busy and traffic's not backed up into the main main highway. We're offering CWD testing at those as well. And then we have the CWD sampling station in Libby, which is a little bit different than check stations. It's not mandatory to stop there, but it's a service we're offering. And we actually closed down a check station that was over in the Canoe Gulch area, kind of northwest of Libby, because of CWD. And there we felt it more important to try to get CWD samples. And even though it's voluntary, we actually see a lot more animals at that station than we ever did at the Canoe Gulch check station. So we're getting some other information as well. It's not just CWD information from running that station. So we have 4 in the region. They're basically open from about 10 o'clock to a half hour after dark, after shooting light. So, and they're Saturday and Sunday right now. Every day.
Yeah. So, like Neil just said, it is mandatory, but do really respect that, gang, and get it, because that does give them some great information. And I know you guys are great at getting people in and out of there. It's not going to delay them too long. So
yeah, and it really benefits our staff. I think that one of the biggest things we get from check station is actually that conversation with some of the sportsmen out there to see what you're seeing on the ground and in your experiences. And it's our biologists are all helping to man these stations, so they want to hear what's going on and what you're seeing, and it really actually does help in terms of what we're considering for proposals for seasons. The actual data is not as maybe as important, I think, at times as that contact with the sportsman.
How about as far as some of the success stories or things that you're most proud of for Region 1? Anything in particular stand out to you?
Yeah, there are a couple of things. Obviously, the habitat conservation is huge. We've been working on a lot of habitat conservation projects, primarily these conservation easements. And right now we've got about 250,000 acres that are permanent conservation easements. So
wow, that's really big.
Oh, yeah,
wow.
It's impressive. And, it leaves that land as a working forest. It's not subdivided. And so it's also open for wildlife. So there's some wildlife habitat that's preserved there. And part of that agreement is also to allow public recreation on their property, free public recreation. And it's not just valuable for hunters, it's open all year round. And so a lot of people take advantage of it from camping, fishing, obviously hunting, hiking, bird watching, whatever it is, And so that's a big deal. We've got about 150,000 acres that we're working on right now that we haven't got to completion yet. And so all told, once we get done with what we have on the plate and what we've accomplished so far, that could be almost 400,000 acres. That's set aside as working forest in perpetuity, as well as wildlife habitat and public access. So that's a huge success, and it's a great program and it's lasting impacts. The other thing I'm really proud of is my staff. We have a great staff up here. They work really well together. They're highly dedicated. They work really hard. And we're really geared towards trying to produce some better information. As biologists, our role is to provide as much good information as we can to the commission, as well as make some recommendations. And, some of the limitations we have up here with the forest and not being able to get good counts. And so we're trying to look at other methods to do that. We have one of the best elk research projects I think I've ever seen, and over in the Knoxon area, where we're looking at everything from the habitat, vegetation to predation, trying to find out what may be limiting our elk population so that we can hopefully expand that to the rest of the region and try to prove things for elk. And then we've got a bighorn sheep project that's in place that we're part of a statewide effort. So we're really trying to get as much information on a lot of these species as we can to try to help bolster those populations, to try to bring them back up to where they were maybe historically, or even maybe even better than that. So I think that part of it too, the research that we have going on in the region, I'm pretty proud of that. I think our staff has really worked hard to get those projects in place, and we work well with the university and our partners on those projects, and they're good projects.
Yeah, well, you guys have a lot to be proud of there in Region 1. It really is a special place. As far as when you aren't doing what you do, taking your FWP hat off and just putting your hunter's cap on, when you go out, what is your favorite thing to go hunt after?
I grew up hunting whitetails, but ever since being in Montana, I think elk are still the animal I probably spend the most time pursuing. They're fun to hunt. They're also, I always think of it as elk hunting is work.
Yeah,
but it's good work, it gets harder once you actually get one on the ground, but, it's very rewarding, and it can be frustrating at times for sure. But, typically if I'm not hunting elk, I'm going after deer, and elk hunt muleys a lot, but up here, I really do go after whitetail, especially a little bit later on in the general season. It's fun. It's fun to do.
Do you tend to be more of a rifle hunter, or do you hunt with bow? Or what?
I hunt with both, actually.
Oh, you do?
I really love the bow season. It's a great time to be out there. If you can get elk buglings coming in, it's a pretty exciting thing. And it can also be, again, very, very frustrating if they're not talking. But, as winter comes in, it's fun to go after those whitetails. They're just it's a fun species to pursue, and they're smart too, and you have to be a pretty decent hunter especially when you get a big buck. But there's a lot of different things you can do, from rattling to still hunt, spot and stock, and it's just a good variety to have.
Yeah, that's what I first grew up on was whitetail hunting, and it was a great way to start, and really remained a passion of mine. It truly is a special spot. I got one last question for you. I had heard, and I've always wanted to talk to somebody like you that actually knows the truth, because I hear these rumors all the time that up in the Yak area, there is actually a herd. This is what I've heard. There's actually a herd of reindeer in that area, or caribou. Is that true?
What you're talking about, the woodland caribou. Well, actually, historically, their range would dip down into northwestern Montana. So Yak, and even over towards Eureka and the 10 Lakes area. And, that population hasn't been doing very well. And it's probably one of the more endangered ungulate species in North America right now. And so we get occasional visitors from Canada, from what's left there, that kind of remnant population. But Canada is actually trying to get a lot of those animals captured so they can start a captive breeding program, and efforts to try to save that species and see if they can't get them to reproduce and then start putting them back out in the field. But yeah, so we do on occasion get reports of caribou up here, and his folks should be aware of that. Obviously, you don't want to mistake that for a irritable elk.
You do not want to shoot one of those either.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, I've just always wondered about that because I always thought, well, now wait a minute, is that really true? So yeah, okay, they do sometimes dip down in there.
Sure.
And lastly, the other question I was curious about, I had an email here just recently because I was letting folks know on our weekly radio show that I'll be having Region 1 coming up here soon. And somebody asked, how easy is it to accidentally cross the border into Canada? I mean, does that happen with hunters often? Or is it pretty well marked?
It's pretty well marked for the most part. I mean, there's a kind of a swath of trees that they keep cleared between the border. And, I do recommend that folks carry, if you're going to be hunting up in there, carry something, like one of those apps, Onyx or whatever, comparable version that tells you where you're out on the ground. Because, we do have border patrol up here, and you start getting over and bumping up into Canada, and you might get a visit from one of those folks. But yeah, it's actually fairly easy. There are a couple places where maybe not as treed that you could maybe run into a little bit more of an issue, but overall, yeah, in the places I've hunted up here where I'm close, you can tell when you're getting close. And usually my cell phone, if you have your cell phone on your coverage, it'll say, "Hey, welcome to Canada."
Yeah. If you're hunting up in Region 1 and you see "Welcome to Canada," then you've gone too far.
Yeah, you might want to look at your phone and see where you're at.
Well, I sure appreciate your time, Neil. Is there anything we haven't covered today that you wanted to make sure and get across?
I think for all the sportsmen out there, what it really encourages is stay involved in the process, and talk to staff, and the whole wildlife management aspect works best when we have good cooperation from the public and we hear what folks are. So we're going to be starting a season setting process that happens once every 2 years coming up this spring, and what we really need is good involvement from the sportsmen. We're going to be asking folks what you see and what ideas you might have to carry forward for proposals. And that interchange between the department and the public and the hunters is really crucial for successful management.
Yeah. And we've talked about that on this podcast so many times, but again, that's another one I'll always keep mentioning is that responding to the requests for input, and that is vital. And I'm one of my main goals with this podcast is to convince people, because I hear this too often, and I really hope that there comes a day I never hear it again as far as, they just say that because they have to say that. They really don't listen to us. That is not true. You guys, that's something that I think every wildlife manager I've had on this podcast has said is, we really, really want that input. It helps you guys a lot. It influences what you do, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. I think maybe it's human nature is we hear that quite a bit, and you say, well, you didn't listen to me. And I think what happens other times is, a decision is made to go a different direction than what folks say. And so you just didn't listen to me. And that's not true. There's a difference between listening and that action that has to be taken. And it can be pretty complicated. There's a lot of different opinions out there, but we do listen to it. And just because you didn't see a change to the regulations that you wanted to see doesn't mean we're not listening. It just means that for whatever reason, we had to go a different direction for that decision. But, it is vital to have that kind of communication, and we do listen to it, and it's important.
Yeah, for sure. And, a lot of that, any changes are up to the Wildlife Commission in the state. So the input that you get from hunters all around can help you make the case to make changes, because the commission isn't going to just let Neil Anderson say, this is what I want, because, you got to make the case. Yeah. So that helps.
Yeah, they always said that, wildlife management is the art of balancing science and the social aspect of it. And so, it's it's, we're there to help try to provide as much of the information, the science side as you can. And there's also that social side of it, which is what, plays a big role a lot of times in some of the management. A lot of the decisions that are made are not necessarily based on biology. It's based on resource allocation and some of the social issues. So yeah, I think it's really good for folks to stay involved. Where I've seen where we've had the best luck is trying to work with sportsmen, side by side. And I think they start to realize that we're all kind of in the same place. We all want the same thing. Every biologist I have wants, healthy, robust wildlife populations, and the sportsmen do as well. And only through that cooperation that we can try to figure out how to get there. And also, talk about some of the things that we talked about now, some of the challenges that we face in order to make that happen.
Well, Neil, I want to thank you very much for spending time with me and all of our listeners from all around Montana and, of course, all around the world. We really do appreciate it and appreciate all the great information you gave us today. So I hope to get to talk to you again. I'm going to bug you again here and get more info from you. It's been very helpful.
No, that's great, Dale. I appreciate it. You enjoyed the conversation. And, we're always... what better to talk about than, hunting and fishing?
That's Neil Anderson, Wildlife Program Manager for FWP Region 1. And again, in the podcast description, there's those links in there. You'll be able to click on a link. It'll open up your email browser and take you right to Neil's email, and you can talk to him anytime you want. And all that. So jump in there and let us know what you thought of this podcast, and ask whatever questions you need, and click on all those links. There's going to be a ton of them in there, so you'll be able to get all kinds of great information about Region 1 and be able to get out and hunt and have some fun up there in that area. Until then, folks, thank you so much for listening. Be safe out there and be good to each other, and we'll see you next time here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Montana Outdoor Podcast. It has been brought to you in part by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. And by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. So what did you think of today's podcast? Send your questions and comments to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com. We should be dropping a new podcast this next Saturday. Until then, we will see you soon out in Montana's great outdoors.